Getting your first 1,000 podcast listeners can be very difficult, especially when you consider the fact that podcasts are a long form piece of content, and we live in a society where short form content like Reels and TikToks are becoming more and more increasingly popular. However, with that said, it's not impossible, and with enough hard work and the right tactics and strategies, you can achieve that within a year. So today I'll be going through the main methods and steps you should keep in mind when starting a podcast and trying to getting it to your first 1,000 listeners. My name is Mustafa and I operate a podcast management agency called Kaiser Media, where what we do is find out the best ways for our clients to grow their podcast as well as manage things behind the scenes for them. And when someone comes to me saying, yo Mustafa, I really want to get my first 1,000 listeners, how can I do it? Usually I would go, the first thing I want to do is focus on your demographic and your target audience. And what I mean by that is, let's say you have a sports podcast where you focus on football or soccer if you're an American, then find other football/soccer podcasts, see what their demographic is, look at their analytic data, find out, is it mostly men, is it what age group, etc. Because what you can do your own research and find out what are the best keywords, hashtags and titles that resonate with that age group or that demographic that they are most likely to click on. Then you can use that for your own podcast, and over time, as your podcast grows, you have more and more listeners. You can then begin to use your own analytic. Let's say, back to a sports example, you have male, mostly 20 to 30s. Okay, cool. Do my research. They're in the sports scene. Men who in that age group, in that scene sector, track the best with these keywords, with these hashtags, etc. Then you begin to using them in your podcast title and your video descriptions if you have your podcast on YouTube, etc. And that kind of helps to accelerate the speed of growth over time, which makes your podcast a lot more efficient in that way. Another method of growth, which is heavily underlooked in my opinion, is collaborations, but not in the conventional sense. Let's use the previous example. Let's say you're a football podcast, you have 100 to 500 monthly listeners, and you're trying to grow. And the obvious thing you think of is collaborate with another football podcaster who has the same number of audience and do a podcast together on your show and one on his. What you can actually do, once you've done the SEO research mentioned earlier, to know your demographics and know what kind of people are listening to you, you can, let's say you're listening, most of your listeners are male, 20 to 30, and their interests are sports. So what you can do, what other podcast does that demographic listen to? And let's say that demographic happen to listen to basketball as well. And potentially we can do, find a podcaster from that niche that you haven't been dived into yet and collaborate with them. Because we know both of you have similar target audience and similar demographics. So odds are you're getting access to a fresh new audience who might never heard of you before, and vice versa to him as well. So that's why it's a win-win for both parties, and you potentially could have made a new connection. And once your audience begins to grow, what I recommend you do this from the moment you launch your podcast, is have social media accounts for your podcast. And this has a number of uses, but the main ones is engaging with your community. This way you have platforms where your community can engage with you, have a conversation, what topics they want to see, as well as you kind of get some feedback from their creator as well. So it's a win-win for them, for people who are listening to you, and a win-win for you because you can begin to see what the consensus of your podcast is. Plus, having those social media accounts will allow people to contact you, whether being guests, so people saw your podcast, bro, you have a good podcast, I want to collab with you, or maybe sponsorships, someone saw your podcast and didn't know exactly where to reach out to you. So having those social media pages allows you to be a lot more accessible by people who are interested in your brands. Plus, what you can actually do in the future, and I recommend start doing this now as soon as possible, is to create clips, reels or shorts out of your podcast and upload that on your podcast TikTok page, Instagram page, or reel or YouTube shorts. Because those short videos, once you upload them on your podcast social media pages, will begin to act as funnels. Someone will see that clip, they'll find it interesting, go, that's pretty cool, that was quite informative and knowledgeable. And then they go on your link tree and see, it's a podcast, and listen to the full thing. Next thing you know, bam, you get a new monthly listener. And actually leads me on to my next point, which is make sure you have a visual version of your podcast that you can use to create clips and reels, etc. Plus, you want to make sure that the YouTube version of your podcast is different from the audio formats. You see, YouTube is a bit of a tricky one when it comes to podcasting, because all the studies that break down more popular podcast platforms don't include YouTube because it's quite hard to filter YouTube by only full-length podcasts. So my guess, I believe that 30% of listeners of podcasts listen to it on YouTube. However, like I said, it can be difficult to judge. But with that said, it's important that you utilize YouTube and utilize its ability to have a visual format as well, because that version of your podcast will now begin to feel like its own product rather than just another audio version. So people have a reason to listen to the audio version that maybe check out on YouTube as well. And then, like I said previously, having the visual format will allow you to make those reels, TikTok, shorts, etc., which again will act as funnels to bring in more monthly listeners and create sort of create a growth cycle for your audience. Some general tips as well. Some of these are quite obvious. Make sure you're on as many platforms as possible: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, the whole lot. Here's a list of the most popular 10. Just make your podcast available on all of them, or as many as possible. Give the communities as well, whether it be it on Instagram, YouTube, podcast, etc. Just because engaging with them will make them more loyal to your content, as well as more likely that they would recommend you to other people as well. So have a frequent and consistent schedule. Research shows that 82.4% of people who listen to podcasts listen to 7 hours per week. So having that frequency, one episode per week, just to keep the content stream flowing is very, very important. And the consistency, usually algorithms will be YouTube, Spotify, etc. likely when you upload more. If for some reason the more you upload, the more likely they'll push your content forward. My theory is that they begin to see that you've got content with a platform, so they begin to favor you over other creators. But make sure you upload once per week max if it's an hour or more, so an hour or longer podcast. Because once you upload anything more than that, if you're an hour or longer, you begin to feel a bit oversaturated. And yeah, that's everything. If you have any questions, feel free to put in the comment down below. We're quite a new YouTube channel, so odds are if you post something down, any questions, I'll be very likely to respond to you. If you find the video helpful, please do like and subscribe, massively helps us out. And hope you enjoy the rest of your day. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care.